and welcome to Talk Art. I am Sally Rayn, and I will be your host as we explore the world of the artist and the art that's all around us. Talk Art is sponsored by Silicon Valley Open Studios. For 25 years, during the first 3 weekends in May, over 400 local artists opened their studios to the public. For event information, artist directories, and maps, go to the website svos.org. Our artist is Carina Rossner. She is a local lapidary artist and jeweler who creates unique jewelry made of gold and silver that's been recycled, and beautiful mineral specimens just like the ones that I'm wearing. She claims that she is an artist by mistake, but I will let her tell you that story. So welcome, Carina.
Thanks, Sally. Thanks for having me. I think if you had asked me 6 years ago if I would ever be on an art show, I'd say, you have to be kidding me. I never expected to be an artist, and I really did end up here by mistake.
Well, tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you start out?
So I'm one of those MBA business wonks that came to the Valley to work in high tech and was all going to make a difference in the world through high tech. And maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But around 5 or 6 years ago, I got sort of burnt out by high tech and decided to focus on my family and spend time at home. And I took up beading as a hobby, and that kept me sane. And that was sort of fun. But then I moved on to work with other pieces. Sort of my business strategy changed, and I worked in a different direction. So 5 years later, I am an artist, sort of, though I kept waiting for somebody to say, you are now an artist. It took me a couple of years to actually be able to say with a straight face what I do.
Yes. So how did you get involved with using the minerals? Tell us a little bit about that. They're beautiful specimens.
They are gorgeous. Back in college, way too long ago, I wanted to be a geologist, and I was really fascinated by minerals, and I used to spend all of my time hanging out at the mineral galleries. I even named my goldfish after wolfenite and other orange minerals. So I didn't do anything with it. I ended up going into high tech. I studied the history of technology. I went on and did the MBA thing. But then when I started to play with the beads, I remembered the rocks, and I started to really want to go back to them. So I started with beads, and I did a lot of beaded work, what I called story necklace, which was with these medleys of different stones. But the more I was around the stones, the more I wanted to actually work with the stones themselves. So I made the mistake of going to a gem show and falling in love with the rocks again.
Yes.
But what I wanted to do was show you how the rocks are in their natural state.
Yes.
So how they grow, their crystal structures, their natural colors. I'm really a lot more about geology than I am about jewelry.
Well, you can tell in your pieces that's really the focal point of it is the rock, and everything is built around what the rock itself looks like. They're gorgeous. So first you say you went to business school, Harvard Business School, and now you're an artist. I would imagine that you have a pretty good business model for your art business. Could you tell us a little bit about how you go about do that? How did you get started, and what does it look like now?
So that's sort of an assumption that the shoemaker's children don't go shoeless. I think it's one of those things where even though I have the business background, it took me a while to look at this like a business, because before I was looking at like a passion, like a hobby. How I started was doing what every other artist does, is the sort of local art and wine circuit, doing the shows, trying to have home shows, trying to sell my work, trying to get validated by people, wanting to spend money for it. But I quickly realized that I was way too lazy to do that. And I didn't want to be spending every weekend on the road setting up shows.
Yes,
it is really difficult. It's like a lot of work, way too much work. So I took a step back and said, I really like making the stuff, but I don't need to be out there every day selling the stuff. So I decided to go wholesale. And instead of pursuing the individual retail market, the people who come and drink lots of wine and then forget what they've bought from you at the booth. I wanted to sell to galleries, to stores, to museums, and have them spend their fabulous energy selling my work or marketing my lines. So I had to figure out how to do that. And I took a plunge and I went and did the San Francisco gift show thinking, oh, they're going to love my work. It was the most expensive education I've ever had. So I quickly found out what I needed to do to be able to sell to stores, to be able to market my line to people who could then go on and market my work, because I wanted to focus on making the art.
That's the dilemma of every artist, I think.
The dilemma of every artist. You know, we all want to spend all of our time in the studios making.
Yes.
And, you know, God forbid we should, yes. So what I learned were a couple of really key things. And one is that I needed to have a very distinctive look.
Yes.
And I needed to come up with a niche, a focus.
Yes.
So I saw the things that you could get at the local gem shows that were being imported for $12 that I couldn't even buy the materials for $12, and I wanted to do something unique. So I decided I was going to do one of a kind. So each of these pieces is a one. There's no three of or whatever. Frankly, nature comes one of a kind, so my work comes one of a kind. The other thing I decided to do was to focus on the natural stones. And that was an unusual thing because I'm not doing the precious stones, the rubies, the garnets, the topazes, which is what you're wearing, but that's gold, that's different. And also to create a line, so a grouping that would look like what it would look like in a jewelry case in a retailer. So have a big wow mambo piece as a centerpiece. Have some smaller pieces for those people who don't have the guts to wear something this glorious. Have some complementary colors, different sizes, different products, earrings, pendants, belt buckles, cufflinks, wrist cuffs, the works. And essentially think of my work and the art that I was creating as how it was going to end up. So if I want to be the prime showcase as you walk in the door at the Museum of Modern Art's gift shop, then my work has to look and hold together like that. So that's what I decided to do. And so I go to, rather than the local art shows, I go to the big wholesale shows. So that's like the Buyer's Market for American Craft in Philadelphia, the American Craft Retail Expo in Las Vegas, the Museum Store Association Expo that happens in a different city every year. And that's where American art stores, art craft galleries, museum stores all come to look for new artists to market their work.
Well, that's beautiful work.
Thank you.
Now, for the creation part of it, we went into your studio and we created a video of new processes that you use to create the different kinds of jewelry that you create. And so we'd like to take a look at that video now.
Hi, I'm Carina Rossner, and I am an artist. I am a metalsmith, I'm a lapidary artist, I'm a jeweler, I'm whatever you want to call me. I make something that I call organic silver and organic gold. And it's not that I didn't feed the metals hormones while they were growing up. What I mean is actually something very specific about my process. I start by recycling and recovering sterling or gold in all its different carats. And then I melt it, and I freeform melt it. So whatever shapes happen are based on how the metal reacts in its molten state to that particular environment. So hot days, humid days, dry days, metal all moves differently. I have 5 different ways that I play with molten metal. The first is flaps. I start with a scrap piece of sheet and I reticulate it. The next one is called splats. I take molten metal and then I whack it with a brick, or I splatter it from a crucible. If I have a rock that looks great all the way around or has a special property like chatoyance where as it moves the color changes, then I might set it in what I call wraps. Pieces that used to be earrings or brooches or charms might end up being incorporated into a piece rather than just melted down. Casts are actual pieces of nature that I have taken and replaced in silver using a plaster casting method. So I go all over the place and find these fabulous rocks and I accumulate them, and I accumulate a lot of them. This, for instance, is what a piece of azurite might look like when I buy it from a mineral dealer. So these rocks, as gorgeous as they might be, are a little too heavy to wear as they are. I end up cutting them up into smaller, more bite-sized pieces and integrating them into pieces like these. Now I'm going to show you how I make a couple of these types of pieces. So this is where I get to play with fire. This is the area that none of my kids are allowed to get near. I've got acetylene torches underneath. I've got a fireproof surface, stainless steel backsplash, and nothing flammable anywhere near here. Fire. So one of the really interesting properties of silver is that as it gets hot and molten, it wants to grow toward itself. As I put the torch on these pieces, they sort of contort and melt. And what this is technically called is reticulation. I enjoy melting the silver on different textures just because different things happen. Different conductivity of the base. You could tell that I wasn't really controlling what was going on. It just sort of happened. Splats are some of the funnest things to do. Soapstone's a relatively soft stone, has a smooth surface, and this is what I use to whack them with typically. What we're waiting for is for it to turn into one glob of liquid metal. Okay. Whee! All right. So the next thing I want to do is show you some splatters from the crucible onto the silver block. As soon as we get to a perfectly round ball, we'll know that it's all molten. Move the crucible really quickly and whoo! There you go. So this is one of my favorite friends. I call him Good Vibrations. It's a vibratory tumbler. This thing jiggles, moves. And it's filled with this ceramic media, which is essentially abrasives in different shapes. It's got a pump, and it'll pump water in with a deburring compound. To show you some before and afters, this piece, for instance, with all of these little scraggly burrs all over the sides, would turn into something like this. And here you've got a hole that formed with some sharp edges, but you can see that it got polished out. It's nice to have a big expansive desk because I like to spread out and have everything to look at so that I can make the best choices. These two pieces are interesting for earrings, and so let's see if we can find a texture. I probably would go towards a splatter just because they're so rough. Tough call. Maybe there's a better home for it. Ooh, look at that. I think that was meant for something like that. Yes, look, it fits perfectly. The crinkles in the surface texture of the silver, I think, really do a good job of echoing the charoite. Fabulous crystals, they're called cavesite, and they grow like little puff balls, so they're beautiful all the way around, but they definitely need a splatter. This is actually the really fun part of doing this, and now we're going to attach the bezel to the base plate. So because the bezel wire is actually really thin and the plate is thicker, I tend to heat from the bottom. And as this metal heats up, the solder will actually fuse the two pieces of metal. It'll make it run together. I have this jeweler's trick called liver of sulfur. When I coat something with liver of sulfur, it will turn black. So what it is doing is aging the metal. So we'll let this liver of sulfur dry a second, and then we'll be ready to polish off the highlights. Safety equipment. This wheel is this 3M wheel that has abrasives built into the plastic. So now I've got the highlights of the silver. The deeper crannies are still dark, so you can see the texture of the silver really well. This wheel will give it a satin buff, so it's a slightly different finish. And there are all these different size bits and different shapes for all the different corners. Now we're at the last magic step, putting everything together. and making sure it stays that way. This is one we just oxidized and then buffed up the highlights. And now you can see why, because I wanted it to echo all the play of the opal. Now this bezel is what's going to secure the stone. So I am going to push the bezel down so that it curves over the edge of the stone. So that's sort of the last part of organic silver or organic gold, where the two of them are mutually complementary in a way that they sort of flow into each other. Thank you for letting me show you how I make my organic silver jewelry. Now let me show you some of my favorites.
Well, thank you, Carina. That was a great introduction to your studio, but I'm really curious, how on earth did you come up with this style?
So remember I told you I was an artist by mistake?
Yes.
Okay, so I started sort of by mistake, and the style sort of started by mistake. If we could call up that piece of Ocean Storm, the first graphic. So this is the first piece I made, and I had taken all these classes to prove that I could do the metalsmithing. I had qualified to work in this open studio at Little House, which is a senior center that has a fabulous jewelry studio and lapidary studio, right? And the first piece I go to make there, I have this beautiful cabochon of ocean jasper, and I try and make the bezel and attach the bezel. And I melt through it. Up at the very top where you see that little ball, I messed up. So of course I yell, "Oh, beep." And everyone rushes over and said, "Did you hurt yourself? You know, what happened?" And I'm thinking, okay, they're going to realize I really don't know what I'm doing. They're going to make me go back and take the class again. And I said, "No, I just made a mistake. I'll start over." And this one woman, Adina McGill, came over and said, "You know, there's no such thing as a mistake in art. Just go with it." I'm like, well, if I'm going to mess it up, I'm going to really mess it up. And so I decided, you know, let's contort it, pervert it, distort it, whatever. And that's how it ended up. And I thought, you know what? This is really fun. I really like how it turned out. My blood pressure dropped while I was in the studio. And suddenly I was like, I wonder what I'm going to make today. So my whole thing is whatever happens, happens. And however the silver melts and however the rocks end up, that's art.
So each one turns out differently, but you don't control it.
No, I think my life is very controlling, so my art has not to be.
Right.
So I really try not to make it happen. So here, for instance, the charoite piece had all of this texture going on, and I decided that the best way to echo that texture was with the petal of the iris. So if you can see the ridges and the grooves in the iris are echoing the charoite. So that seemed like a good compliment to me. Here again, I've used a flower to echo the waviness in the rhodochrosite. The petals are all moving together. And in that particular case, that petal where the rhodochrosite is didn't turn out. When I cast it, it failed. And I said, ooh, oh, an opportunity. Yes, an opportunity, yes. And so that's where the rhodochrosite ended up.
Very nice.
So this is another piece where I had a very large stone that was sort of difficult to try and figure out. And then I had this big splatter. And somehow they ended up going together, and I thought that the splatter feathery fingers sort of echoed the mossy lace agate.
I really like the way it's in front of the stone in this one. That's beautiful.
It is, and actually that is a piece you can wear from either side, and so you could decide which is more prominent, the stone or the silver.
Oh.
So this is a piece called Craven because it's got a lot of holes. No, it's because it's crazy lace agate. And there is a hole that goes through that piece of stone, and I decided to echo that by marrying it with the piece with all the holes in the silver. And there's no way I control those holes. They really just sort of happen. When I whack that stone and let it splatter, it happens. All right, so this one is called Defiant because it gave me no end of grief. I had this beautiful chrysanthemum stone, and I said, I'm going to attach it to this piece of silver somehow. And I tried prongs, and I tried bezels, and I tried all sorts of things. And then I finally said, I'm going to strap you down, and you're not going anywhere. So that's Defiant for you. This one, I had to echo what was happening in the stone, which was this sort of cavern, with what was happening in the silver. And I thought that they blended pretty well together. All right, so this is my most famous pair of cufflinks. They're called Covert, and they were bought by the CIA, and I'm not kidding. I was at the Museum Store Association show, and this man I'd been chatting with and joking with for a number of years now, but who had told me at the very beginning, we're the CIA museum, we sell things like handcuffs, we don't sell jewelry. Finally came and was chatting with me and said, well, you should buy something for yourself. You should have something for yourself of my work because you're such a fun guy. And he said, well, you probably don't make cufflinks, do you? And I'm like, yes, I make cufflinks. And in fact, I have a pair that are called Covert. And I'd call them Covert because they cover up the stone. And that's how I had managed to sort of contain the stone in the piece. So he did purchase them, and they are now currently in use at the CIA. So this one is called Clues because the stone is Chinese writing stone. That is the common name for the stone. But I haven't a clue what it says in Chinese, so it's called Clues. Let's see. Now here is a piece where I wanted the piece to work on both sides. So you'll see the next slide will show you the back side. It was a piece of turquoise from the Sleeping Beauty mine, and it's gorgeous all the way around. So I couldn't figure out which side was the front and which side was the back. So instead I created this sort of orbiting nest, and it's called Escher print because the circles sort of repeat and interlace and never really end. But it's a piece that can be worn on either side or all sides, and it's fun.
That's a great idea.
So this is a piece that really is a very good example of my scraps style. As you know, I recycle all the silver and the gold, and people give me everything from coins, old jewelry, teeth with gold fillings. Yeah, I prefer not to have teeth. But anyways, so here somebody had given me a set of earrings that I'd purchased from them. And I was going to melt it down, but then I saw all of the grooves in the earring piece, and then I thought of this red tiger eye and decided that it was a good match. So this is a piece where the stone was really ugly in and of itself. It was gray, it was sort of boring, it had no color, and it kept reminding me of elephant skin. And then I happened upon this elephant charm that was in my recycling pile, and there you go. And here's one of the gold pieces. These tend to be a little smaller given the price of gold lately, and I do tend to send them with more precious stones like peridot. But this piece really looked like a piece of meteorite. So in Beverly Hills, everyone who came by wanted belt buckles. So I had to figure out how to make belt buckles. And here's one that I called Splish because it's got this little splish of gold on the plane of silver.
Beautiful.
I think that that's all the slides that I brought to show you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. There's such wonderful work and very vibrant colors. I really enjoy looking at it. Very nice work.
I really love to work with color and texture, and I think nature makes such amazing things.
Oh, yes.
So my laziness comes into play because all I want to do is create a vehicle for them.
Yes, they're very nice. So you are an artist in the Silicon Valley Open Studios. And tell us a little bit about what you think the benefits are for being an Open Studios artist.
Well, one of the biggest benefits to me is all of the fabulous things I get to trade for, like this beautiful shawl, all the things that you saw in my studio, all of the art there I've traded with other artists I exhibit with. Another big benefit to me are the ideas that I get. You know, working by yourself as an artist can be very isolating. So it's nice to go and be with people, especially people in other media. I happen to exhibit at the Great American Framing Company in downtown Palo Alto, and they are a fabulous host, Jim and Jamil. Well, so I had this one customer who was a man who said, I'm buying these things for my wife, but you know, I really would like to be able to look at them when she's not wearing them. Well, here I am sitting in a framing shop, and look what we came up with in collaboration with Jim and Jamil. So we created these frames with a little hook in them. So when you're wearing the piece, it's on you. But when you're not wearing the piece, it can be a piece of wall art.
Very nice idea.
So it's been a fabulous new business line. I've also gotten the idea from them to make cufflinks because Jamil's a big cufflink person. So the other thing I found is that I'm really inspired by the floral art and the flowers that people incorporate. And so that sort of got my mind thinking, and I ended up casting flowers to incorporate in my work. So the stuff you trade for, the ideas you get, and frankly, the fellowship. I have made some really good friends, and I've gotten lots of tips about, you know, constant contact marketing, different ways of promoting my work. I get feedback about my displays, all sorts of good advice.
Yes, excellent. So with all of these rocks that you have, the mineral specimens, where do you find them?
That is the $60 million question.
That's the secret. Are
yeah,
you going
that
to
is
tell
the
us
secret.
more secrets? Come on, you could tell us.
You know, I don't actually find them myself. I don't go, you know, splunking in caves. I have picked up some pieces of really beautiful granites from Tahoe and stuff, but these are really mineral specimens from all over the world. So Tucson is this big confab. It's like 29 huge shows that each happen for about a week. They are each about the size of a football field, filled with, you know, 10 by 10 foot squares. And you get miners, dealers, cutters, people from all over the world. I mean, so there's people who have these cut and polished tanzanites, and right next to them you've got these African tribesmen with these gunny sacks full of tourmaline rough, and they just sort of pour it on the table and say, what do you like?
Oh,
so
rock lovers heaven.
It is, it is. It's a very expensive place to indulge in your secret passions for stones.
Well, Carina, thank you very much for being on Talk Art. All your wonderful jewelry has really been inspiring. I really appreciate you being here. And thank you for watching our show, Talk Art.